Asim put the company in perspective, and a lot of what we are hearing from customers and why we're building a lot of these things. So if that was setting the stage, why are we here now? Like, we should have done Tech Field Day a long time ago. I agree with Steve.
Yes.
How you kick off. We're all on the same page there. Why are we here right now, though, right? And part of it is, to Asim's point, we've been talking a lot over the last year about where the company's going, the fact that we're a new company, a lot of these IoT things, but a lot of our customer conversations are still in the data center. They still need help with some of the basics of, I have too much information, I have too many systems, I need help managing it, I need help getting my arms around this data. So I might have been a hard sell to say I'm a deep dive yet, but imagine me as the marketing animated table of contents for the rest of your day. Right? So I'm going to put in position what we talk about when we talk about the modern data center. And you'll see all the product presentations and solution presentations that come out through the day plugging into this as we go forward and how they help our customers. But I didn't want to just, we do talk. I know Asim just presented this slide, but I think it's critical in the sense that this is a story that explains what we are trying to build to help our customers. Because we are having, all over the place, customer conversations around data. And they think of us first as a storage company. We get that, right? There's a good reason. We're pretty good at that. But if you think of storage and how we can protect that data and what we can do when we help you manage that data, that's just the foundation. You're going to hear us talk about that. You're going to hear us enriching data. That's all about, now that I have this information, how can I separate it from the application? How can I add metadata that makes it useful? Activating it, that blending that data across systems so we actually get some cross value and the IT team can begin to bring value back to the business, show how we can pool things in ways they hadn't thought of. And then monetize again. That may be those conversations that we actually do have truly business. And it's an interesting way to look. You ask, how do we go to market? Vantara, yeah, we kind of have a technical go to market. But when we team with Hitachi, that idea of that SIBU that came up, we might be talking about building someone a desalination plant for a city. That is, technology is enabling that, it's being part of the conversation. But the Vantara may be, look, we may be selling a storage system, we may be selling a data pipeline analytics solution to help a customer with a different challenge. So there are varied answers to that question. But we can't talk to every customer just about, we're here to help with data, because we have a lot of systems, we have other capabilities they need help with. So one of our biggest conversations is around data center modernization. I know we're completely unique by using those words, right? But so that is a big one for us. We also talk about data governance, obviously with GDPR, everything going on, really important. You'll hear a little bit about that in here. And we talk about this idea of data-driven insights. So using that analytics to get smarter about your data. The reason we're here is over the last month and a half or so, we have announced new storage systems, new AI ops software to help you manage the data center. Right? We've brought out new offerings to run data center analytics and automation for you. New cloud offerings with containers, new data protection technology. So we've had all of this new data center technology come out that adds to the larger conversation we've been having as a company, and we want to have that conversation with you guys about what we're doing and get that input and feedback. So to position data center modernization, I do what every marketer should be scared to death of, is I start a slide with the words digital transformation. And as I've joked in the past, lightning bolt hasn't yet hit me when I use that, so I'm hoping that it'll make it through today. But it was funny, at dinner, Tim and I were having a conversation. I said, interestingly, he was talking about what's on CIO agendas, and I said, we talk about these three things, which sounded very much like what we were talking about. Operational efficiencies. How do I use data about my business to operate more efficiently? That's one of the big three elements we see. Drive better customer experiences. Surround that customer. I know you, I can better interact with you. And new business models. We all use the example of why is a bookstore all of a sudden one of the biggest IT vendors. They found new business models faster than other people. That's fundamentally the big tenets we focus on. But the reality is, back to that conversation that Asim started, these are all just data-driven conversations. They're about knowing more about either the operations or the customer or the markets you compete in. And as we connect more of this data, we begin to see or fulfill these opportunities better. And the more data, the more opportunities we see. So yes, you know what? Digital transformation as a buzzword makes me nervous as a presenter. But as a customer conversation, call it what you will, this is what IT is trying to figure out. How do we have a role in helping drive the data conversation within my company? And so in this room, we all know, and as a storage company, we've sort of benefited from, the more things we connect, it just accelerates data growth. And it wasn't as if any of the companies we were talking to already were like, yeah, data growth is easy to manage, no problem. But it's just getting worse because of all this connectedness, because of all this new type of data. I love the IoT rage where, there's all this new data, and they say, well, aren't you guys a storage company? I go, what do you think? IoT data stores itself? Does it manage itself? Someone has to be the adult in the room to understand the life cycle of that data. What typically happens, though, at least what we're seeing, and I know you guys will voice your opinions here, we see silos of infrastructure or processes or groupings put on how will I protect this data? What will I store it in? Where will it sit? And look, in a certain way, we understand why this is. Some technologies work better for some types of data than others. But that potentially siloed world becomes the foundation of the data center. When that's your foundation, if you're trying to help the business get to outcomes, if IT, who's managing that data, is trying to help show what to do with it, it makes it that much harder to pull it together, to get those insights, and then ultimately drive some sort of outcome. So this is one of the things we're trying to help with everything you hear today to fix, because we think that's not great to have silos, but that's probably not what's real. What's typically real is you don't not only have silos in most data centers, what customers tell us is they're full of products that don't work together in any meaningful way. Because look, we have technology that's going to look different if you maybe have just pure objects and you're building a storage cloud or you're doing some governance and you're enriching it versus a block storage device. But what can we do to simplify how owning those, managing those, and sharing data across those is easier? Because when you have all these different tools, as we know, you're training people on different management, you're dealing with different interfaces, you're raising costs and complexity. Ultimately, you're making it hard for business people and IT people to talk data because you're so worried about just managing systems and the challenges around it. So pick your favorite stat. We're in Boston, so why don't we use an HBR, Harvard Business Review stat. We're trying to get people to think about, can you simplify the data silos you have, the infrastructure challenges, to make it easier to have a data conversation. What HBR found is this idea of being a digital master really means owning and understanding your data, and 77% of people don't feel they're there. And we think part of it is you're starting with the wrong infrastructure to get there. You have to begin to simplify that. That will allow the data to flow. So we wouldn't be presenting this if we didn't think we could help, right? So we are focused on, and what you're going to hear a lot about today is this idea of an agile data infrastructure. That's the nice marketing phrase to talk about how do we get you to the right storage that you need? How do we get the right data in all flash? How do we move things where it needs to be? How do we look at converged systems to make your application rollouts and data center management easier, et cetera? You know where that goes. We can then at least get a common way to store most of your data. We then want to look at the protection of this information. How do we modernize the protection? Because by and large, people are still using old practices that no one really loves, and we're beginning to see people wise up that there's a better way to do this. And maybe there's also a better way to protect information and still make it useful for that analytics conversation we were talking about. And then lastly, what we're going to talk about is this idea of intelligent operations. So what fundamentally this means is, can we be, with all the technology we have, smarter about how we manage these devices, how we manage the data lifecycle, how we understand what's going on with the data center. We're going to talk about that in terms of technology you can buy and run from us to make that life easier, or services where we will take that ownership and make your life easier. So fundamentally, these are what we're trying to do, because if we help fix that infrastructure and make it easier to bring that data together, we think you're more likely to get the outcomes that the business is trying to get to. And that's going to, of course, lower costs. Does this make sense so far? This is a high-level entree, I understand.
It makes sense, but I struggle because there's these two conversations, and you're trying valiantly to bridge conversation between the technology part and the business part, but it still seems like there's a pretty significant chasm between. And you say you're talking about business outcomes, and then you're talking about data center modernization, and then sort of hoping that different groups of people who are entirely siloed and speak different languages will bridge that gap, and it just doesn't seem like it's happening in the real world to me.
Well, I think the last part is as critical as the rest of it, which is I think in many of our customers, there's still a gulf between IT thinkers and the business, and we are finding if there is one glue that brings them together, it's not called a computer center where the IT team goes, it's called a data center. If we get them thinking about, if you can talk to the business about how you're simplifying access and control of data, you're one step closer than saying, do you care what system it's on? Of course they don't care what system it's on. So I don't know that I disagree, but at the end of the day, we are still selling to lots of IT buyers who need technology, and they need it to put it in a framework that makes sense. And the framework that we've seen is you got to modernize your data center, or these data requests that the business is coming in for, you're never going to keep up with.
Yeah, but I guess, Bob, the thing kind of bridging off what Ben was saying is I'm having a hard time connecting the dots between what you just said and that business outcome. Like, so great. So I use Hitachi's solutions to modernize my data center. How exactly is that going to change that business outcome? And what is it that Hitachi specifically is doing versus, let's say, a competing product that an hour from now, they could come in and give a similar presentation, say, buy our product, use it to manage data, will affect your business outcomes. I'm having a hard time connecting those dots. There's a very, like you said, there's a very big gulf, but you're not making the connection for me.
So I guess there's kind of two if I split that and correct me if I'm splitting it wrong, there's kind of two issues. One is, how does data center modernization help answer the business challenge? The other one is, why Hitachi for data center modernization, right? Those the two things.
Sure.
So I think the first one is, I don't know what customer X's business problem is. What I can do with this conversation, which is why we have other data governance and analytics type conversations with those customers. But in this one, if I can arm the IT team to feel more confident that they're going to be able to help that business, I don't know. You know, at a financial customer a couple weeks ago, their challenge is fundamentally different at a business level than a retailer is. But if their IT team says, sure, light up new data, I can protect it, I can store it. I might be able to get insight because now I have some metadata that can show you how these systems interrelate. We're trying to prepare them so they can be that partner. But I can't tell them at an IT conversation, which this fundamentally is, what that business challenge is. I can make their life easier so they can partner with the business better. Fundamentally, in an IT conversation, that's probably as far as I can go. The second one, hopefully at the end of the day, we're going to go through these pillars. We're actually going to do it in reverse order, but that's fine. We're going to go through those pillars and show you what we're doing that we think is unique to be better at modernizing the data center than the next person.
So, Tim, I get what you're saying, and I think you're looking at it from a CIO's conversation. This isn't a CIO's conversation. This is, you're talking to an enterprise architect, you're talking to a CTO. They need to make the broadest data center strategy as possible to support these outcomes. At the minimum, I want my partner to understand what the outcomes can be. So I think the challenge is that when Hitachi and the like talk business outcomes, unless it's one of these other IBUs using the technology to talk about a specific solution, there is no connection.
Well, I think that's the difference, and that's the advantage that Hitachi has, Vantara has, compared to the other 5,000 vendors that are all ramming the same thing down our throat, that they can actually tell those vertical stories. So that, to your point, Dudette or Dude, who's tasked with modernizing the data center, can at least understand how that applies in a vertical way to a business.
But the guy running the data center isn't actually involved in that. I mean, every vendor says this. We're selling speeds and feeds, but really we're selling a business outcome. No, you're not. You're selling speeds and feeds. Because that's ultimately how you will win your sales, is our speeds and feeds and features are better than anybody else's.
But the Hitachi group connection helps with the narrative.
Every vendor says, but it's all about a business outcome. No, if I want my CIO to look at the speeds and feeds and buy the best speeds and feeds. But, sorry, but you have, as Ben said, you have.
Yeah, you can't have it both ways, though. I'm sorry, I disagree. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to talk business outcomes, absolutely the CIO is going to be involved. If you're talking about a 7-figure purchase, absolutely the CIO is going to be involved. And why should I buy or partner into this ecosystem versus another ecosystem? I agree. If you're down in the weeds, absolutely. I completely agree with you. But when you start up-leveling the conversation, when you start getting into conversations about how this ties into a particular business outcome, absolutely the CIO is going to be involved. And as soon as you start to ignore that is your first mistake. But to your point, if you're not going to get to that conversation, truly get in that conversation, it's completely misleading to throw that out there. You're just, it's architecture, it's kind of, it's almost false advertising in a way.
I'll give you a real example. I partnered with our CIO on an 8-figure IT project in the last year. And the business requirement, it was sponsored by myself and the head of sales and finance and services. So co-funded 8-figure, multi-year project, IT. Our business requirements related to data protection because of GDPR, and it related to making our operations a little bit more efficient. And it was fundamentally a data problem that we were trying to solve. Laid out our business requirements to the CIO, and CIO went down this path to evaluate her options for what to do. You're absolutely right. This is a message for IT, right? Mm-hmm. But it's just one of the pillars of what we talk about, right? But if we're going to talk to IT, and they've gotten their business, they've got their marching orders from the business, and they got their funding, they need to go hit these, right? And we need to dive deeper into these absolutely to show how we're different.
I think part of the problem is too often, we kind of fall back on the historical approach, which is you talk about the speeds and feeds, that's where IT focused.
Yeah.
When the fundamental
that's not the IT moving forward. That's the difference between traditional and transformational IT orgs.
Yeah, and the fundamental question is you're right, Keith, like the audience for this is asking for a certain thing. The question is, will that audience exist in the future, or will the audience be a business-centric technology buyer?
Could be, yeah.
So again, in perspective, right, if you think of the multiple conversations we may have with customers, this is one of them. And this is positioning the technology portfolio as a way to make them more efficient and make them a little bit more able to have that data conversation. If we were calling on a SIM as a vendor and he was our customer, probably wouldn't lead with data center transformation or moving forward with digital transformation and data center modernization. But if you look at what we have announced over the last few months, that has been IT-centric technology, and this is how we bring it out to talk to customers about how we're going to make their operations and data center more efficient. So that's the kind of guys for today. The thought of today is really showing, because look, we could be accused of not having talked as much about our core technology for the last year or so. We wanted to announce all this suite of new tech and kind of show you guys what we have to get input on its relevancy and its differentiation in that IT conversation. So yes, I am kind of recentering us a little bit on the IT conversation. So with that, because I know I'm going to go way over at this rate, but I'm going to walk through these pillars, what we are doing, and that's going to set up more of the real deep dives that come after me. So if I go to Agile Data Infrastructure, I can pretty go quick on this one. You guys understand this. We are still trying to approach it from a data conversation because what kind of infrastructure you need is relative to what you're doing and what kind of data you're storing. But we need to get people thinking about the different kinds of data that are coming in, and files and blocks and objects, and what applications are using it. And get people thinking about, hey, applications may feel different in this IoT architectural revolution, right? You have new machine data, you have other things coming in. Are you thinking about what that means? And also we have to understand all data is not going to be in a data center the way we used to think of 4 walls, right? This is a virtual data center. As Sim said, everything's turning into a data center. So where will that data be? Some of it will be on site, some will be off premises. We understand that. We then try to get people in the conversation thinking of, when we look at what we're building and what we're doing, we have to start with, what are the applications? How are people going to be using this data? What is it there for? What platforms will it be running on? Because we need to do the integration, of course. And we have to think through all of our customer conversations we are having with the IT teams. What are the different use cases they may be deploying our technology? So when we go and talk with them about what it is we can do to help them, is it, do you need something like a converged solution because you feel you need a robo, or you need something fast and agile, or are you doing a tier 1, revenue generating application? Because those conversations drive what infrastructure requirements we need to build into our capabilities. Things like if we're starting to have DevOps conversations, we need to have that container integration. If it's tier 1, always on performance, et cetera, we need to be understanding our all-flash capabilities, et cetera, across the portfolio. And really the key that I'm trying to get to here is those different requirements are driving what we put into our portfolio. Today, we're going to dig into a lot of this. So you're going to hear a presentation about what our new storage systems can do in the afternoon, right? Big focus on what we've developed, the performance, the capabilities. We'll talk about that. You're going to hear John Chinnis talk about our content portfolio, what we're doing in Object Store to enrich that environment. We're going to go in, Ravi and I will come back up and talk about UCP, our converged infrastructure solutions. Where's that going? Gary and team are going to talk about our cloud offerings, right? We can put something on a site that you only interface as if it were a public cloud, but it's there running in your environment. So we're going to touch on what we're doing in all these spaces that we believe we have the portfolio that can answer these different requirements from our customers. We certainly understand that while it's about, quote, data center modernization, again, the data center is not some four-walled object that nothing comes in or leaves. And in all of our solutions, there's elements of we know that and we need to build in cloud readiness. So whether that's being able to move VMs between on-premises and Amazon in our converged solutions, whether it's be able to automatically tier data to the public cloud or anything that speaks S3 from our core storage when you have files, or the content platform natively speaking S3 so you can move files where they need to be. What are we doing across our portfolio, including building cloud solutions to put on site that our customers can get? So across our entire day, you'll hear us talk about the different integration points that we're enabling cloud to happen for our customers and accelerating that for them. You'll also hear a bit about the fact that it's interesting. Customers want to talk about modernizing the technology in their data center. They're almost equally interested in modernizing their experience in getting that technology, purchasing it, that livability experience. So, of course, vendors are very happy to take large sums of money for large systems and software purchases. That's great. But we're also doing a lot on utility. And you're going to hear some of our specific as a service where we actually will manage things for the customer. And they pay, usage goes up, usage goes down. They pay for us to do that work for them. So across, whether it's storage, whether it's our management software and managing a data center, our cloud offerings, we want to have multiple different ways for customers to engage with us to get that technology in. Because we see a modernization on what they expect here as well, not just in the tech. So if that's the infrastructure components that we'll talk about, the storage, the portfolio there, how it helps answer those different use cases, we also, of course, need to talk data protection. And I love using this slide. I say the marketing guy with the world's ugliest slide. But I think this always resonates when a customer sees it.
I've seen uglier slides.
You've seen uglier slides? All right, I got to work on that.
I've created them.
Well, we'll work on it. And the poor guy who built this is laughing because it's a great slide, and I know who built it. It wasn't me. But the fundamental here is first we have to think about, and you'll hear us talk through data protection in a number of ways today. You'll have a drill down on some of our tech. But first is, what are we protecting? What is that infrastructure that we are protecting, right? Is it the application, the operating system, the locations where it is? Then it's, what are we protecting from? Is it a site issue, a regional issue, someone accidentally deleting an email, someone purposefully deleting lots of emails? Like, what is it that we're trying to protect from?
All of the above.
All of the above. Well, but different applications rate different challenges higher, right?
And in my days as a DR consultant, thinking about the disaster is the first mistake. You have to protect against everything, because if you protect against only the things you thought of, something you didn't think of comes around.
See, that's a customer order we need more of, right? We'll take one of everything. Of every problem. But for a lot, when you bounce it off the service level,
if you give me net 4 million, no problem.
But if you look at the service levels, right, then the question is, how long do I have to protect this? Maybe nothing. I need to always be in production. How long do I have to recover? How much data can I lose? Then you begin to map the technology. What we don't want to do is say, I'm here to sell you a technology. Let me tell you what your problem was. Because again, we want to have a portfolio approach. You may need some snapshots. You may need multi-data center replication. We don't know. The problem with this complexity is the one thing we can do, and the product we will show you, is something called Hitachi Data Instance Director. So fundamentally, with all of these copies, not only is that a compliance risk, because you forgot a copy somewhere that you shouldn't have forgotten about, but it's also just a simple management risk. And maybe we can make that information more useful. So what we can do is simplify the look and the management of all of those copies with Hitachi Data Instance Director. A lot of that's local copies, so we can integrate with the applications that data goes to. But it also refers to modernization of what we think of in DR planning, to your point, Howard. Maybe it's not just, I'm going from New York to Jersey City anymore. Maybe it's, I want an active multi-data center environment there, and I want a third copy in Cleveland to take it home with Steve. So we need to have that understanding, and we should have that simplified GUI to help you see all of those copies regardless of where they are.
Would you put this in the category of copy data management?
So very much so from that perspective. And John McDevitt's going to actually show you how that tool works. So it is very much copy data management plus management of the array-based replication as well. So it's a bit of a broader view than some of the CDM conversations. There's one other thing that I like to put into this idea when we talk to customers about getting modernization into their thinking for data protection. We see most environments that have lots of systems, some of ours, some different generations. Everyone's goal is get me to that new fast system, probably all flash. There's a price tag often associated with that, et cetera.
Yeah, by the time you get everything to that new system, it'll be time to buy a new system.
And then there's a new system.
Yeah,
Not the way we migrate data. Come on, we're good at this. But fair. But we know why they want to get there, right? All these great capabilities. But yes, there is a consolidation benefit, or challenge. But the big thing here too is we're having customers begin to think. I mean, the easiest and silliest conversation is, I'm sure you've never backed up a file that hasn't changed, right? I mean, of course, the ridiculous of that question. If we can begin to do an investigation of the environment, the customer I was at a couple weeks ago, they admitted a good chunk of their VSP capacity was static, unstructured data that wasn't changing. And as much as we'd love to sell them a great big VSP for that, why don't you have that in a well-managed object store? Why on earth don't you find a more efficient, better way to use that and maybe make that data available?
Because the business users never tell us what data is actually completely cold and what data is merely cool. And so we migrate all the user home directories for all the people who don't work here anymore. And then we get a call from accounting that says at the end of the quarter, we can't close the quarter because the spreadsheet is in Sally, who left 6 years ago's home directory and always has been, but there are UNC links inside the Excel spreadsheet.
Right.
That's why.
Yeah, not only does the business unit not communicate the value of data, they don't know the value of data, and they don't even know how to identify data.
Yeah, the problem,
Because they're not data people.
the data problem is not an IT problem. The data problem is a business unit IT
But what I am hearing-
communications problem.
What I am hearing, though, is that gulf between IT and business, the one thing that begins to bring them closer is trying to have a data conversation. And this is an idea of, can we look at your data?
But Bob, the real
Tim's
problem.
coming for me. I can
The
see
real
it.
problem.
He's ramping up.
The real problem is the benefit of this
Yeah.
accrues to IT, but the work of identifying what data needs to be moved is in the business unit, and there's no benefit to the business unit of spending all their time figuring out what's old, cold data. They'll just push it on IT and go, here, it's your problem, you worry about it.
Fair enough. So that's a challenge. I mean, some folks have figured this out. Certain application types, they don't have some of that challenge. But yes, that is the challenging conversation to have. The good news is, and I'm not going to go into this, but John Chinitz will do briefly, if this technology gets in, you actually have so much more you can do with it. But what we find is if you can speed your backups by moving that unstructured data out, that's one way to begin that conversation. But yes, you have to be able to figure out the data you can move. All right, the last big area that we're going to spend time on, and actually, this is what, after the break, you're going to transition to first, right? This is this idea of intelligent operations, or we also talk a lot about this idea of AI ops. Now, the fundamental idea, and you guys will know this better than anyone in the room, right? As we get ready and plan for, as customers are planning for what they're going to do and how they're going to manage the data center and all the systems, very cross-functional, all the teams are involved, they understand what is supposed to happen as they go forward. They begin to really look at what's going to interoperate, how will operations work, and they get a plan for managing that environment. But once we get going, when the management begins to happen, and if the red light shows up, typically it's Band-Aid world, right? We try to fix the problem and move on. We try to fix another problem and move on. We don't want users screaming. We can tend to get off track from that original plan, right? We're either adding capacity or figuring out a performance problem, and maybe it's not as holistic as we'd like. So this is the common challenge. And we do have multiple conversations where customers are simply saying, I need help managing the environment now. I can no longer keep up with the systems. So what we're going to talk about today is this idea of AI operations. And yes, you will see some demos, and you can have that discussion about what's AI and where is ML and are we using it right? And I'm sure that'll be fun. I'll have a front row seat, which is great. But there's kind of two fundamental areas that come together. And if you ask one of those areas is, yeah, a lot of people talk about managing the data center. We're fundamentally focused on bridging together the analytics across the data center, what is going on, all my systems, and then automating the actions that come from that knowledge. That's fundamentally the connection that we think we're driving and we can get ahead of in the industry. So Where the AI is why don't you watch my environment over time, learn more about interactions, learn more about when a failure occurs, what happens, so you can do better root cause. So you can be predictive about capacity growth and system growth, et cetera. So you're going to see some demos and understanding of that analytics capability. And then automation. Across our portfolio, everything moved to a REST API, so we can talk to and automate fundamentally whatever system we can see. We can take commands from other data center management tools and see them out in the IT infrastructure. You'll see those tools and get an understanding of how they fit in.
But just to be clear,
Yeah.
the context when you're talking about AI operations, talking about AI with data, it has to do with managing the infrastructure. It does not have to do with the company data and bringing
In this
insights.
conversation, yes.
Yes.
In
Okay.
other parts of the business, we may be having how do we use AI algorithms to help with your,
Mining.
your data for customer, understanding what they might want to buy next. We can bring in analytics and do that and set that up. But in this conversation, in the
Got it.
data center modernization context, the AI we're talking about is managing that data center. There are ways we can pull AI in to do advanced analytics on anything.
Yep.
But in this context, it's about in the data center. So we try to simplify this, and this is sort of work to keep ourselves sane. The one is the brain. And we think of the brain being the IT analytics in the infrastructure. So the tool you'll see is something called Infrastructure Analytics Advisor. Fundamentally, that and the underpinning data store underneath it can do heterogeneous data center analytics. Servers, switches, ours, others, you'll see what that looks like. So that tells me what's going on. What is happening in my data center? What do I need to know? Then someone actually has to do something, run the template, run the automation program. That's a product that we call Hitachi, guess what? Automation Director. Didn't surprise you on that one, I'm guessing. But so this is the one that says, I see something that's happening, I can run a template. I can simplify those groups of what I need to get done, either with a click or just have it run automatically. Accept something in from a ServiceNow, for instance, just have it do, finish the ticket. You'll see what that tool looks like. And then we talk about this idea of amplifiers, because regardless of how good those tools are, we know we are not going to do everything for everyone. So there's kind of two ways we think of amplifying this value. One is that connection with tools that are sort of higher level, the ServiceNows or others. How do we understand what they need and execute something in the infrastructure for them? The other is our own tools. So how do we, and you'll see all these tools today, but how do we automate, let's say I need to carve off more capacity for Oracle. I understand that Oracle has a certain type of protection requirement. I automatically tell the data management tool to set up that protection on the new capacity. Why should a user have to remember all that if we have policies in place about how to add capacity and what type of protection that capacity gets? So this is fundamentally the tool set and how we're thinking about it, and you'll see more of a deep dive on these. And then this gets to sort of our vision. All right, and at the end of the day, look, there's going to be, someone wants to see what's going on in all of the IT systems, in all the data, the systems that are running that data, there's a global control. In a lot of likeliness, that's probably not us, right? That's just the reality we're in. But we need to understand what that is and feed into it as needed. This second layer of AI-driven planning and optimization, we think we can play there really strongly. We'll see what you guys see throughout the day. Be a really interesting conversation. How do we enable that from an IT systems perspective? Ours certainly with rich data, but also heterogeneity across other people's systems. And that really answers that IT analytics. How do we help show that? But what we're trying to do is build a platform in the data center that allows for much more. So we have some fun with facility analytics. So what if a chief risk officer wants to know, in this data center, if there was ever a security issue, what is my risk? So could you pull the security system and say, like, how many unauthorized access attempts to this data center were there, and what are the systems in here? What users would that affect? That could be an interesting conversation for a risk officer. The video camera, the systems, who's in the data center at what point in time, is that relevant to the actual systems? Can we correlate anything? Oh, maybe. You could also do smart power, smart cooling, right? If we see fluctuations in those systems or they're not operating correctly, again, how do I tie that to what systems are in the data center, what users are affected? Could I make a smart choice? Could I see a change in a chiller that says I should automatically move an application to another facility? That shouldn't be that hard if the analytics tool can see and flag an automation tool to move. And then world analytics, I typically just like it because I'm in marketing and it sounds super cool. But kidding, if you think of things like weather feeds, right? Why couldn't we do that same idea? If the typhoon is headed toward us, maybe it's a good time to make a clean copy on the remote site or move something. Why can't we shift application leads? That's just a data feed. Under the IT analytics, you have a pool of data that you can do analytics, you can leverage that AI, and you can start to make decisions. Now,
Frankly, if there's a typhoon coming to your Singapore data center and your guys in Singapore aren't already on the phone, but you're waiting for the worldwide weather report to trigger your problem, something's wrong.
all right, well, maybe there's a more tactical example that wasn't noticed so obviously as the typhoon, or, they were watching the World Cup and not the Weather Channel, these things happen, right? So, but then the last idea is, of course, getting to software-defined everything. And you'll hear some of the engineering we've done to prepare us for this future, and then toward the end, maybe some of the mics off, we'll talk a lot more specifically about some of the systems. But fundamentally, right now, it's like, hey, I'm running out of capacity. Give me some more capacity for Oracle. Maybe in the future, it's I'm running out of processing or capacity. Light me up a VSP or light me up a storage system, in that remote site, and you actually deploy the software-defined system. I mean, that's where this is headed. So why can't we see what's going on in the facility, what's going on outside the facility, and begin to automate? The key is these tools that you'll see today set the stage. It gives you that underpinning of data. It gives you the automation engine. And this is just how we tie in other data sources as our customers are looking to make smarter decisions of managing. So fundamentally, I'm done. This is a high-level slide that says, hey, we think we're good at this stuff. We're here to help. But you're probably expecting that, so that's not a big surprise. What you're going to see through the day is we're going to talk about all the AI ops. We're going to show you the data protection. We'll talk about some of the systems. And a lot of it's going to be demos because a lot of vendors talk great games. I can build PowerPoint slides. I can't build products. So seeing how some of it actually works, I think, is going to be important. And getting this feedback on who is the right audience. How do we tell this story to the right data center folks?